Rubble everywhere, smoke rising over the camp, soldiers groaning under the open sky. The hospitals were gone, collapsed. Hundreds of wounded soldiers lay in the open, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. German POW medics were allowed to work outside, a decision that no one would ever explain. No one spoke about it, records never mentioned this. And yet somehow, lives were being saved. But how could they survive under the open sky in the heart of chaos? No one dared imagine what happened next. Spring 1945, late war. Streets of the camp littered with debris, collapsed buildings. Allied guards patrol cautiously. It was spring of 1945. The war was ending, but for the POWs, survival was far from guaranteed. The camp hospitals lay in ruins, walls crumbled, windows shattered, and the faint smell of smoke mixed with dust filled every corner. POW medics moved quickly, carrying what little equipment they had, preparing to treat the wounded outside under the open sky. Something wasn't as it seemed, no one expected this. And yet they followed orders that seemed strange. Something had changed here, but nobody could say exactly what. A medic discovers missing surgical tools in the rubble. A soldier whispers of an odd injury pattern. As medics began their work, small but unsettling details emerged. Instruments were missing, some injuries seemed oddly patterned, and whispers ran through the crowd. No one dared speak, it was as if the world had stopped. Faces grew pale, hands trembled, yet everyone carried on. Something larger, something darker, seemed to hide behind the chaos. And still, nobody could explain why. Medics treating dozens at once in the open, night shadows stretching over the camp. Hours passed slowly. Medics worked tirelessly, their eyes darting between wounded soldiers and the distant ruins of the camp. New POWs arrived, exhausted and broken. Unspoken rules guided every movement: avoid eye contact, ask no questions about the missing equipment, and stay calm. Blood-stained cloths were everywhere. The smoke of nearby ruins blurred the night sky. A glance said more than words. Something didn't add up, but no one spoke. And yet, every life they saved came with a silent cost. A medic suddenly disappears. A crate of files is gone. Suddenly, the routine shattered. One medic stopped appearing. Files that once held medical logs were missing. Medics whispered urgently, casting glances toward the ruins. Nobody could explain why something had changed, but what? The air felt heavier, charged with a tension no one could name. Every movement now seemed shadowed by hidden eyes, and the wounded waited in silence, unaware of the invisible danger. It was as if the camp itself held its breath. Night has fallen. Smoke rises from distant rubble. The open sky above the ruined camp is dim, the last light of dusk fading. Medics move quietly among torn blankets and scattered debris. POWs lie in uneven rows, their breathing shallow, faces pale, eyes wide with fear. As darkness settled over the camp, a hidden operation came to life. Medics worked in near silence, moving swiftly between the wounded. Torn sheets and blankets became makeshift stretchers. Wooden crates turned into improvised tables. Every motion was precise, almost rehearsed, though no one had ever been trained for this chaos. It had happened before, but no one ever recorded it. No one ever spoke of it. A young medic kneels beside a soldier with a deep leg wound. He tears a piece of cloth from his own uniform, ties it tightly around the wound to stop the bleeding. Another medic finds a cracked medical kit, sifting through half-broken instruments. In one corner, a medic pressed his palm against a soldier's leg, applying pressure with shaking hands. A wound, jagged and raw, seemed almost impossible to treat. Yet he did not hesitate. Nearby, another medic rummaged through a cracked kit, rusted scissors, bent clamps, and empty vials. Every tool salvaged became a lifeline. Faces twisted with pain, but there was a strange calm in the air, a silent understanding among the medics. We must save them, no matter the cost. Something wasn't written down anywhere, yet it was happening again. A tattered notebook is opened on a crate. Scribbled notes detail procedures: wound care, makeshift surgeries, rationed medicine. A medic flips the pages quickly, glancing at the shadows, ensuring no one notices. Amid the chaos, a notebook sat on a crate, pages frayed and smeared with ink and blood. Detailed instructions, written in cramped handwriting, outlined methods for treating wounds without proper equipment. Every page hinted that this was not the first time such extreme measures were needed. POW medics had faced similar crises before, yet every time the records were erased, the stories forgotten. The notebook was a silent witness, a guide in a world where guidance had vanished. And still, nobody dared speak. It was as if even the night itself held its breath. Soldiers lie waiting, trembling, some whispering quietly to each other. A medic moves between them, whispering instructions, keeping morale steady. In the background, smoke curls from a distant fire. The medics' faces are lit by lanterns, showing exhaustion and quiet fear. The wounded lay in rows on the ground, eyes wide with uncertainty. Some whispered softly to one another, clinging to what little hope remained. The medics moved with a strange rhythm, half fear, half determination, whispering words of encouragement, checking vital signs, making difficult decisions in seconds. A glance exchanged between two medics spoke volumes. "We can't fail here, not tonight." Smoke rose from the distance, blending with night air, carrying the faint scent of charred timber and dust. The open sky offered no comfort, only exposure. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last. Every breath could be the difference between life and death. A bloodied hand reaches for a vial of scarce medicine. Another medic hands over a makeshift splint. They work tirelessly as the night deepens, aware that allied guards watch from a distance but do not intervene. Hands, slick with blood, worked quickly to stabilize shattered limbs and staunch wounds. Vials of precious medicine were carefully rationed. One drop could save or lose a life. Splints, twisted from wood and string, were secured with precise knots. All the while, the medics never raised their voices, moving as if the night itself demanded discretion. Outside, the faint clink of distant guard boots reminded them of the fragile truce. POWs saved, but always under watchful eyes. The night continues. Medics keep working, exhausted, faces shadowed by lanterns and the faint glow of the ruined horizon. The scene lingers on a young soldier's eyes, wide and fearful, then slowly closing as he drifts into unconscious relief. By the time dawn approached, dozens of lives had been saved in the open. Under the ruins of a destroyed camp, the medics, soaked with sweat and blood, allowed themselves a brief pause. They knew the work would continue and that the hidden operations of the night were only a part of a larger story. Something vital had happened here, yet no records would ever show it. The night had passed, but the shadow of it remained, etched into memory, unspoken but unforgettable. It had happened before, and it would happen again, though the world would never know. Weeks have passed since the hidden night triage. The camp is eerily quiet. Shelves that once held medical files are now empty. Smoke still lingers in the air from collapsed buildings, but the chaos of the previous nights has subsided. Medics move carefully, their movements measured and deliberate. Weeks had passed since the nights of makeshift triage. The wounded had been treated, the immediate crisis survived, but the camp felt different now. Shelves that once held medical records were bare. Files, logs, and careful notes gone, burned, lost, or hidden, no one would say. And yet the medics moved cautiously through the silent corridors, aware that every action was now under scrutiny. What was erased? Nobody could say, but the absence spoke louder than words. Someone had made sure no one would know, and the consequences of discovery were unspoken, yet understood. Medics checked their limited supplies. Rationed medicine remained scarce. Instructions arrived by whispered notes or hurried orders. Each day, the medics follow rewritten procedures, some familiar, some new, yet all designed to obscure the true events of the night triage. Medicine was rationed more tightly than ever. Each drop counted, each decision scrutinized. Written instructions were now scarce, carried in folded pieces of paper or dictated in hushed tones. Protocols were rewritten, some steps familiar, others altered without explanation. The medics understood the rules. Save lives where you can, but erase all evidence. The system itself had become a trap, a control over memory, over history, over survival. Every movement, every note, was now part of an invisible system, and every shadow could conceal a question too dangerous to ask. A medic carefully hides a notebook previously used during the open-air triage. Another wipes blood stains from a table that once served as an improvised operating station. Faces are tense, silent. Even minor mistakes could draw attention. Old notebooks, those that had guided their hands through the chaos of open-air surgeries, were carefully hidden. Tables, once covered in blood and sweat, were scrubbed, cleaned, erased. Every detail of the night operations was being systematically removed. Medics knew the cost of leaving evidence not just for themselves, but for every POW who had survived. Suspicion lingered in every glance. Relief was fleeting. The shadow of tension never lifted. And yet they could not stop the memories. They lingered, unrecorded but indelible. Allied guards walk through the camp with calm, indifferent faces. No one intervenes, but their presence reinforces the unspoken rules. Every act of control is subtle, almost invisible. Allied guards passed silently, indifferent yet watchful. They did not intervene, but their presence was a constant reminder. The system was watching. The medics learned to move like shadows, efficient, careful, precise. Every action measured, every glance calculated. The camp seemed orderly on the surface, but underneath, the hidden operations of the previous nights had left marks that would never fade. And in the silence, the medics whispered among themselves, sharing fragments of what had happened, knowing that no record would ever acknowledge it. Some medics glance at the ruins in the distance, remembering the nights of chaos. Their faces show a mixture of pride and unease. The wounded have recovered physically, but the scars of fear and exhaustion remain. Occasionally, a medic would glance toward the ruins, recalling the nights when lives had hung by threads, when every decision could mean life or death. Pride in their survival and the lives saved mingled with unease. Unease over what was hidden, over what could never be told, over what had been erased from the official record. The camp had returned to a semblance of order, but only order carefully constructed, carefully controlled. Every erased file, every rewritten procedure, ensured the story of their courage would remain invisible. And so life continued outwardly calm, yet built upon shadows, secrets, and erased truths, waiting for the day someone might ask the wrong question. Lanterns flicker in the dim night as medics finish their rounds. Empty shelves and burned documents surround them. They exchange quiet nods, silently acknowledging the work done and the work that could never be recorded. By the end of each day, medics paused only briefly, reflecting on what they had endured. They had saved lives, yes, but at the cost of leaving no trace. Every shadow, every erased page, every rewritten procedure was a reminder that survival had its price. And though the camp appeared calm, the hidden story remained, a story of courage, secrecy, and the unyielding control of memory. Some things, they realized, were never meant to be known, and some secrets would follow them forever. Dawn breaks over the ruins of the camp. The first rays of sunlight filter through broken windows, casting long shadows over rubble-strewn streets. The air is crisp but heavy with the lingering smell of smoke and dust. The medics walk silently among the ruins, exhausted but purposeful. As the sun rose, the camp lay quiet. The chaos of the past week seemed to dissolve in the soft light, yet the scars remained not in the buildings, but in those who had lived through it. The medics, once shadows among the wounded, now moved openly, yet their eyes carried the weight of every life saved, and every life forever altered. They had acted in secrecy, improvising under impossible circumstances, and yet no record would ever acknowledge it. And no one ever spoke about it again, except in whispers, where the story lived only in memory. A young medic pauses beside a ruined wall, looking at a torn sheet that had once served as a makeshift stretcher. His hands tremble slightly as he remembers the night-long triage, the faces of the wounded, and the impossible decisions. Every object in the ruins, a torn blanket, a blood-stained sheet, a bent instrument, was a silent witness. The medic's hands had touched them all. Each memory carried both triumph and torment. The courage to save hundreds of lives came hand in hand with a burden that could never be shared. The fear, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation all remained etched into their hearts, unspoken yet undeniable. Some secrets were meant to stay buried, yet the weight of them never faded. POWs, now recovering, move cautiously through the camp. They glance at the medics with quiet gratitude, some nodding, some silent. Trauma lingers even as physical wounds heal. The survivors moved slowly through the camp, their bodies mending but their spirits forever altered. They looked at the medics with gratitude, sometimes in nods, sometimes in silence. The medics had saved their lives, yes, but had left behind a reminder. Survival comes at a cost, and the cost is never fully visible. The camp had regained a sense of order, yet the moral complexity of those nights remained unspoken, lingering like shadows across every brick and stone. Lanterns are extinguished as sunlight strengthens. The medics walk toward the perimeter, their silhouettes stretched long over the rubble. The camera lingers on their faces, solemn, reflective, changed forever. As the medics walked through the ruins, the sun illuminated their faces, worn and lined with the weight of experiences no one else could understand. They had chosen life, risked everything, yet had erased the evidence to protect others and themselves. Courage had existed in the open air, among rubble and smoke, yet the world would never know the full measure of their deeds. Every saved life carried a shadow of what had been endured: the moral discomfort, the silent suffering, the unrecorded heroism. And though they lived, every glance, every breath reminded them. The nights in the open air would never be forgotten. The camera pans over empty streets, ruins, and distant camp walls. The medics disappear from view. Birds begin to stir. A quiet wind moves through the rubble, carrying the faint scent of smoke. The scene fades slowly. In the end, life continued. The camp would rebuild. The medics would continue their work. But the story of those nights, the hidden triage, the erased records, the lives saved in secrecy, remained a quiet truth, known only to those who had lived it. Some choices had been heroic, some morally uncomfortable, but all were necessary. And so the world moved on, unaware of the courage, fear, and sacrifice that had passed beneath the open sky. Some secrets were never meant to be told, and some stories remain alive only in the hearts of those who bore them.